So today, as we wrap up this series, we're reminded of what we said at the very beginning, that in times of upheaval, chaos, confusion, uncertainty, fear, revelation has tended to pop up again in the popular mindset. And this is throughout the centuries. And certainly in the past couple of hundred years, even in the time of the Civil War, there was an uptick in interest in the end times. Of course, you can see why. And then again in the upheaval of the 50s and 60s, the Cold War and the Civil Rights Movement. And now we're in one of those times when we have seen great change in America, and we have seen, once again, forces that have reared their ugly heads throughout our history come to the surface again. Nationalism and racism and this propaganda and lies and trying to turn America into something that it's not meant to be, the opposite of what it was meant to be, using religion to justify that, to baptize these ideologies. And it's thrown our society into chaos. And that video does a great job, doesn't it, of portraying that chaos. And then we have the midterm elections coming up in November, and then we know the presidential elections coming up in 2024, and that's always a difficult time now in the United States, it seems, especially over the past 10, 12 years or so. And so this is one of those times when revelation has risen to the surface again, and people are asking, what is going on? It just seems like we're reaching the end of something, and those who are more optimistic would think maybe it's the beginning of something new, but it's going to be painful to get there. And so that was part of the reason that we chose to do this series now, because of the time that we're living in. And at the same time, the approach that I'm coming from, that I shared on week 1, is that I don't believe that Revelation is just about the past or just about the future. My approach, and this is just me, but I believe that Revelation is relevant in every generation that has ever lived and ever will live. That there are things that we pick up from the book of Revelation that are shockingly practical and eerily relevant to our lives, even our personal lives and the stuff that we go through. It's not just about world events and prophecy, but about the things that we go through in our everyday lives, and today is no different. And so we've talked about all those familiar questions, the mark of the beast and the 144,000, the return of Christ, the millennium, the last judgment, the war of Armageddon, and so on. And today we're talking about the very end, when all of the tribulation is over, and there's this time now for all of eternity, where God will dwell with God's people, and we will dwell with God, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes, in a time of newness, a new heaven and a new earth. But once again, it's not just about the future, but that causes us to ask, what new thing is God doing in our lives right now? So we're going to jump in and just quickly to recap, because I've thrown a lot of information at you here. There are 4 views, predominantly, of Revelation. The first one, the futurist view, is the view that most Americans are familiar with, because that's the televangelist version. There are Bible prophecy charts about how there'll be 7 years in a tribulation and maybe a secret rapture, and then Jesus will come back, and War of Armageddon and all this kind of thing. And the Left Behind series sold 65 million copies in the United States, and it was the most popular Christian book series ever, and it was the futurist view, and they made movies. But there are actually 3 others: the historicists, that Revelation has been fulfilled in stages throughout history, and then the preterists. It might be shocking to some of you, but the majority of Bible scholars probably hold the 3, that most of Revelation was fulfilled in its time. I know that's some people, they just think that's a buzzkill. They want it to be about the future, but there are a lot of scholars who think, much of this stuff looks like it was fulfilled. But then there's the 4th view, the idealist view, and that's certainly one that I hold strongly, that Revelation is always relevant. And I've shared, I'm a mixture of kind of 1, 3, and 4. I think Revelation does say some things about the future and about the past, but it's relevant in every generation. And so it's not just what God's going to do, but it describes what God is always doing in your life and mine. So today, when we read about God comforting people, when things are being made new, here's my question as we go through the sermon today. What in your life steals your peace? What steals your joy? What keeps you from feeling comfort? And we live in very difficult times. That question's probably not hard to answer, is it? You're like, where do I start, Ryan? How much time do you have this morning? Because there are all these world events that are happening that are stressing us out, and then there are all the personal stuff that we all go through in life. What is it that causes you to be worried about the future? If you wake up at night, what is it that's going on in your own life that steals your joy, steals your peace, invades your sleep at times? What is that? You know, we feel so much pressure in the United States. We are overworked. We don't take enough vacation here as we come up on fall break here in this area. We live just such stressful lives. What is it that's stealing your peace and joy and your sense of comfort? Maybe you've been praying for circumstances to change in your life, or that a relationship would change. Maybe you're just feeling, you talk about pressure, maybe you're feeling like, man, the forces are just pushing in on me right now. And you've been praying for circumstances to change, but they're just not changing. And you're like, God, what do I do now? Please make this stop. I'll do anything to change things, but they're not changing. What do you do? How do you deal with that? What's stealing your peace, your joy, your comfort, your rest? That's where we're headed today. We're going to talk about being open to God as God makes things new, to challenging us to think in new ways, to see in new ways, but also experiencing comfort and rest and hope and refreshment, even in the times that we live in. So let's start by reading the scripture from Revelation chapter 21. This is verses 1 through 7. You'll see it on the screen. Let's read. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain. For the old order of things has passed away." He who was seated on the throne said, "I am making everything new." Then he said, "Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true." He said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water without cost from the spring of the water of life. Those who are victorious will inherit all this, and I will be their God, and they will be my children." Sounds pretty good to me. How about you? Is there much paperwork involved? Where do I sign up? I would love to be a part of that. And you may have heard this passage read at funerals because it's comforting and it reminds us of the promise, the hope that we have in God, that this life is not all there is, and God will make everything new. But once again, it's not just about the future, but about what is God doing in your life right now. And so, some interesting details in this passage. The New Jerusalem that comes down out of heaven here is about 1,400 miles wide. It's about the size of the Roman Empire. Isn't that interesting? You remember the context of this letter? Revelation is a letter sent to how many churches? 7 churches that are now, that were in what is now Turkey. And it's written by a man named John, who's exiled to an island called Patmos, about 37 miles off the coast of Turkey. He's been exiled for his faith. The local authorities demanded that everybody in the empire worship the emperor, Domitian. Don't we wish we were done with people wanting to be treated like God when they're political figures? But Domitian wanted people to worship him and proclaim Caesar is Lord, Kyrios Kaiseros. And most people in the empire could do that. But there was a group of people who couldn't do that. They couldn't say Caesar is Lord. Why? Because they said we can only say Kyrios Iesus, Jesus is Lord. And that was a problem. And so they said, well, we'll go for the leaders. And so maybe John was a pastor. He may have been a pastor of these 7 churches. The letter actually goes around in a circle as though you were traveling this circuit. Maybe he went there one Sunday per church. And he would just go around and teach. We don't know. But Revelation is sent to those churches who are being persecuted by the Roman Empire. And so the New Jerusalem is about the size of the Roman Empire, saying God's going to make everything new. And the description of these, of the New Jerusalem later in chapters 21 and 22 come from the Old Testament. The new heaven and the new earth come from the book of Isaiah in the Old Testament. The quotes in the passage are from Isaiah. The New Jerusalem looks like the Holy of Holies in the ancient Jewish temple. You can see how they've drawn on their scripture When you're going through a chaotic time in your life, you tend to draw on things that are meaningful to you, correct? Things that you've learned, things you've internalized. And the jewels may refer to the high priest's breastplate in the Old Testament. The streets of gold and the pearly gates from these chapters are illustrations of the beauty of what God does in our lives and the glory of God. The tree of life likely refers to the Garden of Eden. And so these descriptions are symbolic, and they're meant to say that the New Jerusalem is the culmination of everything that God has been doing. It's not just God does it then in the future, but everything God has been doing. And finally, God has made everything as it should be. God has made everything new. And it's this comforting message to these 7 churches that were being shut out of the trade guilds, the unions, the economic system because they wouldn't worship the emperor. They wouldn't play ball. And nobody wanted to attract negative attention from the rulers. And so Christians who wouldn't say Caesar's Lord, they got left out of the economic system. They couldn't buy or sell because they didn't accept the mark, so to speak, the mark of the beast. And so now this is comforting to them, saying, no, this is what God is actually doing. God wants to comfort you and do something new in your life, and it's not always going to be like this. Times are going to get better for you, Revelation says. Is that a message that we need to hear as Americans right now? Times are going to get better for you, folks. That's what Revelation says. And so how can we apply this to our lives? What does it say to us right now? There's so many things we could talk about. And I'm going to share a little bit out of my own life, actually, this morning, if that's okay, just to kind of share, my experience of allowing God to do new things in my life. And maybe you could identify with that in some ways, but maybe the first thing we could take away is to be open to the new thing God is doing in your life. Be open. Open, that's a great word. One of my favorite words, be open to the new thing God is doing in your life. God is doing something new. It's not just in the future. God right now is doing something new always in your life. There's always an opportunity. God is always at work. Revelation is a synonym for the word apocalypse. A lot of times we think apocalypse means the end. Apocalypse actually means to uncover something that was previously hidden, to take the lid off, or to pull back the curtain, like a stage curtain, to uncover something. So it reveals, right? It uncovers what we couldn't see previously. So God is always doing something new, whether we can see it or not. And this means to uncover so we can actually see what God is doing. In verse 5, Jesus says, I'm making everything new. There's a famous verse in 2 Corinthians 5 that says, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, a new creation has come. The old has gone, the new is here. All this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. God is always recreating you and me and the earth and everything that God is doing. It's always new. God is always doing a new thing, renewing, restoring, recreating creation, undoing the effects of the fall, bringing about goodness and wholeness and flourishing and beauty in our lives and in the world. And we just want to take the lid off that and be able to see what God is doing, to be open to what God is doing. The theologian N.T. Wright, one of the best New Testament theologians in the world, says, what God is doing from Genesis to Revelation is renewing all of creation. It's what God does. So last week I shared that I had this cool experience that recently I gotten an email from a religion reporter at the Associated Press asking for an interview. And she had done a story here in Arizona about a pastor who works with migrant populations. And she was researching churches in Arizona, and she found the well. And she reached out to me and asked for an interview about the well for a project that she's working on. And how cool is that? And so that's a testament to who you are. Yeah, it's something to celebrate. It's a testament to who you are. Those of you who are watching online, you're a part of a community that is doing something. It's doing something new. God is doing something new. And through us. And so this reporter saw what's happening, and we actually had that interview this past Thursday. It was a really cool experience, and it was through Zoom. She sent me a Zoom link, and we had a discussion for about a half an hour. And the project she's working on is how the political environment in the United States is affecting congregations. And I said, wow, that's a big question. You've definitely bitten off a lot there. And so she's interviewing several pastors, and I shared with her, well, certainly within the well there are different views. This is a church where people can agree to disagree. We say it's a place where you're free to express your questions and doubts. So there are different views here. I said a lot of times, though, what I hear from our congregation is They have tension in relationships with family and friends, or maybe former church friends. People that, they kind of rant at them because they've changed in their views, or maybe they never really fully accepted some of the things that they were supposed to pretend that they believe, and so there are family members who kind of rant at them if they don't hold their political views, and it's a very divisive time. And so we had a conversation about that and how important new community is, forming new relationships like we prayed about with the new Connect groups and so on. And the last question she asked me was, how do you feel about the future? What do you feel about the next few years in America and the future of churches like the Well? And so I gave her a kind of a condensed version as much as possible. I don't condense very well. You know that for a fact. But I said, there's this version of Christianity that's popular in America that salvation is about going to heaven when you die, and that's it. You pray the sinner's prayer, and so now you're saved, and I want to be saved. I want to go to heaven when I die, but it seems to be this version that is only about this, that salvation is you'll go to heaven when you die. It's kind of fire insurance. And so salvation is about some other place, some other time. And that's convenient for people who want to do whatever they want in the current situation and act unjustly and proclaim ideologies that are wrong and lie and spread propaganda, because they can just talk about Christianity being about some other place, some other time, and it doesn't mean anything to our lives now. And I said, but I don't think that's what God is doing. I think God is always making things new. God is always at work in our world. God has an opinion about white Christian nationalism, and it's not good. And God has an opinion about whether we love our neighbors as ourselves, and if that's not happening, and that we should order society in such a way that promotes that. Justice and righteousness in the Hebrew scriptures, those values of doing what's right by everybody, the just thing, the right thing. And I said, we've been in this series on Revelation. And so I said, my honest answer to your question is, I think the next few years in the United States are going to be really, really difficult. I think it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. But then I think what's happening is God is always working to break through. And there's going to be some point, I don't know if it's 5 years from now or hopefully less than that, or 10 years from now, when there's going to be a breakthrough in this country. And it might come through really ugly times, but there's going to be a breakthrough in this country where there are going to be enough people who realize what we've been doing over the past 10, 20 years is not working, and we're tired of it. We're not going to let racist ideologies from the past rear their ugly head again. We're not going to allow these ideologies to divide us and demonize immigrants and people of color, and we're going to move past that. We've had enough of it. We're going to leave it in the past, put it in a museum, and we're moving forward as a country. I said, as Martin Luther King Jr. said, the arc of history is long, but it bends toward justice. I believe God is breaking through. The kingdom of God is growing, and so it's going to get really rough. But then, like Revelation, suddenly there's going to be a breakthrough, and things are going to get better. And she just kind of stared at me for a second. I thought, oh, what's she thinking about my answer? I don't know. And she smiled, and she said, that is really nice to hear. She's like, I'm glad you think that. And that comes from Revelation. That's a view that I don't know that I would naturally have. I think we are living in extremely difficult times. I think the next few years might be even worse. But the message of Revelation says that God is doing something new. We can't just escape suffering. That's not the answer to our fear and anxiety and whatever steals your peace and joy. It's not this, we're just going to, skirt it all and escape it. That's not what Revelation says. It reminds me of a story. A guy in the congregation one time said that his grandmother, who was a nice, kind lady, sees everything that's happening in the world, and she's experiencing health problems that flare up. She's getting to that time in life where it's just constant doctor visits. And it obviously weighs on her. And he said recently she started to send texts to her kids and grandkids, like, Jesus is coming back really soon, get ready. Jesus is coming back. And he said that's her way of comforting herself. She's facing, illness, and we all understand she's lost friends, and it's a difficult time. And she's trying to comfort herself by sending texts to her family, well, Jesus is going to come back really soon. And well, maybe she's right. We don't know. Jesus said nobody knows the day or the hour. So we don't know that. We don't predict that. Have no idea. But she'll send those texts to her children and her grandkids. And he said, of course, she doesn't think about it like this. But what she's really saying in her texts are, you and or me and your grandpa who's passed away, we had a great life. We had a good, long life. We got to have kids and grandkids and experience all the ups and downs of life and the happiness and the tears and all of it. We experienced life. You guys aren't going to get to do that because Jesus is going to come back. You guys are going to die soon, basically. Your life's going to end. And she's sending these texts to, a 20-year-old grandchild, just, going into college. They got the whole world in front of them, all this excitement of life. And she's basically saying, oh, you're going to die soon. And she doesn't think about it that way, of course. It's comforting to her to think about that. And so she sends that to her kids and grandkids thinking that she's helping. It's hard for me to think about, sometimes people think they're helping. God bless them. They think they're helping. And to her, that's a comforting message, and you can completely understand why. Because given the choice between having a disease or watching your health decline and being incapacitated, and then you die, or Jesus comes back in the clouds of glory surrounded by God's holy angels and takes you home. You pick. Which one sounds better to you? And so it's a comforting message, and Revelation says someday that will be the case. But that's not necessarily the message that Revelation sends to every generation. It's not that you're going to escape suffering. It's not that we're going to just somehow escape everything over the next few years in the United States. We certainly haven't escaped it in the past 5 years. We've suffered plenty. But the message of Revelation is that even as you go through tribulation, Jesus says, I was dead and I am alive again forevermore. I've gone through it all. I've been there. And guess who's going to be there with you in your suffering? If your worst fears were to come true, we don't even want to go there, but I'll be there with you. That's the message of Revelation. You don't have to fear. You don't have to live in anxiety and terror. You don't have to wake up at night in a cold sweat, wondering what's going on. You don't have to let anything steal your peace or your joy or your comfort because you're open to the new thing God is doing in your life. Not trying to escape, not trying to sidestep. Nobody wants to suffer, of course. But understanding that the real message of Jesus in Revelation is, even in tribulation, I'm going to be there with you, and we're going to make it through together. And let me tell you about the end of the story. There's going to be a new heaven and a new earth, and I'm going to wipe away every tear from their eyes. No more death, nor mourning, nor crying, nor pain. What is the new thing that God is doing in your life? And are you open to that? Are you open? And there are actually psychological tests that test our openness. And some of us do find it easier to be more open to new experiences than others. Sometimes it's more of a challenge for you. It's something to respect. It's part of our makeup. Back in seminary, I took a test. It's called the NEO-PIR. And it's a personality assessment. Good news, I have one. I was pleasantly surprised. Oh, you do have a personality. Actually, one time, somebody came from another church here to visit here, and she said, I love this. One of my favorite comments, and I love her. She's a great person. She said, I've always felt like at a former church, the pastor could kind of be a cult leader. He just had this charismatic personality where people would just do whatever he told them to do. He has all this charisma, and people just follow him and stuff. And she said, I don't have to worry about that with you. And I was like, wait, what are you saying exactly? I could lead a cult if I wanted. What are you talking about, I loved it. It's one of my favorites. But I took this personality test, and one of the categories it tests you in is your openness to new experiences. Now, it's not bad to be less open because there are other things in your personality that are strong. People who are less open actually tend to be more dutiful and responsible. So that it's not good or bad here, but openness is required to grow and be open to the new thing that God's doing in your life. And so it measures on a scale up to 100. And the average seminary student, they found, measured a 40 in openness. Does that say anything about religion in America? The average is 50. The average person has an openness score of 50 out of 100. The average seminary student, pastor, has a score of 40. That means something, I think. The average is 50. My score was a 65. Now, that's not, no, because your score could be a 35. And again, in the test, you're probably a more dutiful, responsible person than I am. So that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just when it comes to openness, would it be any wonder that I pastor a church that says things like, well, you're free to explore your questions and doubts? You see? It's just personality. But no matter what your score would be, and even if it's more of a challenge for you, if your openness score would be lower, it would be higher in other areas that you could be proud of, that I'm lower in. So it's not a good or a bad thing. It's just when it comes to openness, how open are you to the new thing that God is doing in your life? And if you find it difficult to be open, one of the things to consider is, well, God is doing a new thing, and it requires us to be open to the new thing God is doing. And then if I'm not open, then I get left behind. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to miss the new thing that God is doing in my life. I want to partner with God. I want to be on team God. I want to grow. I want to partner with God and what God's doing in the world. I want to be a part of the new heaven and the new earth, not just then, but also now, as God renews the earth. So we want to be open to the new thing that God is doing. And as we do that, the new thing that God is doing will both challenge and comfort you. If you're a note taker, it'll both challenge and comfort you. One of the first things Jesus says to John in Revelation 1 is, do not be afraid. That's because there are things happening in our world and in our lives that cause us to fear, or that our response is fear. And then I love it. The first thing Jesus says is, do not be afraid, because often when God appears in our lives, I'm going to do something, I'm here to help, our first response is often fear. No, I don't want to change. I don't want to, well, and it's like Jesus is saying, trust me, this is going to be a lot better than the alternative. And so be open to the new thing. Don't fear. Do not be afraid. Maybe God's calling you to step out in faith and do something. Maybe it's a call to a ministry of some kind. And our greatest passion often comes from our greatest pain. Maybe you've experienced something in life and you know what? I just don't want other people to experience that. And you feel a tug at your heart to get involved and to partner with God and be in ministry and let God work through you to do a new thing through you in people's lives. Maybe you sense a call of some kind. Maybe it's a call to a new career, a vocation. Where vocation means calling, by the way. Your job, your career, it can be a calling. Maybe you feel God leading you to change careers. Maybe it's trying to move a relationship forward. Maybe it's a relationship that's stalled and there's stuff that needs to be discussed, or maybe there are boundaries that need to be set. I've had lots of conversations with people here about realizing, well, the new thing God's doing in my life is I can't be torn apart by this person who's ranting and raving at me all the time because I don't believe the same things they do. Or this person who is mistreating me, maybe that's the new thing. Maybe it's a personal challenge or a financial challenge, a connect group, a new church. Our first reaction to that new thing God is doing is often fear, because it is challenging. Last week, though, we talked about the mark of the beast in Revelation 13 and seeing the beast in Revelation as not just a guy in the future. That's just too easy of an interpretation. But if Revelation is always relevant, the mark of the beast reveals unjust systems that aren't just about the future, but they're also about now. And so if it's just about some guy in the future, that's easy for me to just kind of say, well, I don't have anything to do with that. But no, Revelation's always relevant. So the beast manifests itself in many ways in our world. And certainly that new thing that God is doing in your life, part of that is going to be getting on team God and confronting the beast. Standing up for what is right, speaking up for what is right, standing up and be counted. Not just trying to keep the peace if that means that you just enable whoever is doing something wrong because you don't speak out against them. The beast of violence and injustice exists in every generation. And so part of the thing that God's doing in your life is going to challenge you to stand up and confront that. One of the ways we're exploring doing that and being on God's side is this border connection trip that we've talked about. And it's not just about this one trip. The first one is this coming Saturday, actually, for those of you who signed up, and then the other one's on the 22nd. But There are other things we're going to do after this. There's going to be a series of table talks for those who go. And then there are ministries locally that we're going to explore that serve the refugee population, the asylum-seeking population. House of Refuge, Matthew House is another one. So we're exploring partnerships with them, and you're going to hear more about that. This coming holiday season, we're going to partner with a school in Phoenix to provide some things for kids who just have some needs that would help them to get a better education. And that's a challenge, but it's being open to the new thing God is doing. Let's just be honest. We talk about immigration and asylum seekers and refugees. And there are people who hear that and they think, oh, you bleeding heart liberals. Because these people are being used as a political football in the United States. They're used to demonize others and create a fear of the other. You realize that's one of the oldest tricks in the book? That some politicians use to try to get you to vote for them. They create a common enemy. Oh, look at those people. They're coming to get your stuff. And I'm going to protect you from those people. Vote for me and I'll protect you from those hordes of immigrants coming to get your stuff. There's always some caravan of migrants that shows up at just the opportune time. I'll protect you from the caravan of migrants coming to get all your stuff. Don't fall for that. It's one of the oldest tricks in the book, demonizing people who have nothing to do with your problems. And some demagogue says he's going to make all your problems go away if we just get rid of those people. I'll just say this. I'm thankful that immigrants were allowed into this country because my family's one of them. I'm thankful I was allowed here, that a bunch of poor Scotch-Irish immigrants could come to this country and try to make a better life. I'm thankful for that. Most of the people who try to come to this country, they never make it in. I'm not for illegal border crossings and all that kind of stuff. We have a legal system that welcomes people. Most never make it in. Those who do, they're on the margins of society. The scripture says, treat the foreigner like the citizen among you. Love your neighbor as yourself. And so this isn't a way of trying to be liberal. This is a way of trying to follow the scripture. And I'm going to ask you a question. Because I know how it feels, because I know the stuff in the water in the United States and the airwaves, the propaganda and about immigration, all that kind of stuff. I know how it sounds to some people. When it comes to immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees, can I just ask you an honest question? Are your views informed more by cable news than they are Jesus? Just let you wrestle with that. Because that's a call for all of us in the time that we live in, surrounded by propaganda. And this can go for all kinds of things. But are your views informed more by cable news than they are Jesus? And if so, here's the challenge. Be open to the new thing God is doing in your life. As God constantly renews us to see what God is doing, not what the talking head on the quote-unquote news says, but what God is doing. I'm not for breaking laws and all that. Okay, we're talking about loving our neighbors. So the new thing can be a challenge to you. Whatever that new thing is, no matter what it is, even if it has nothing to do with that, the new things God is doing in your life, it'll be a challenge, but it'll also be a comfort to you. The new thing will also comfort you. And so for this grandmother who was texting her family and telling them essentially, I got to live a long life, but you're going to die soon because Jesus is coming back. The message is not, no, that you're going to escape suffering. No, I'm going to be with you in the suffering. And Revelation is comforting in a different way than we expect. It's realistic comfort, that there are ups and downs in life. We said last week, a lot of times we think, history, if we're optimistic and we think history is getting better, then it should be this straight line that just goes up, like life just gets better and better and better and better. And that's just not true. Even if things get better in life, if we grow, if the world is getting better as God works over time, history doesn't look like a straight line. It looks more like this. We showed this last week, where there are ups and downs in life. And so that new thing God is doing in your life, it's going to be comforting to you because we all experience these troughs, these valleys in life. Where are you? You could apply this to world events, or you could apply this to your own personal life. Hopefully you feel like things are getting better in your life as you look back over the past 5 or 10 years. That may not be the case. It may be that, man, you've been heading down so long. You're like, man, Ryan, I don't even know where the valley is. But where are you in your own life? Even if you're in one of those valleys, The message of Revelation is comforting to you. God says, I'm doing a new thing in your life. You're not always going to be in the valley. And that's just faith. It's like Jesus saying, do you trust me? That there's hope. Now, depression is really an illness, just like heart disease or diabetes. Depression is an illness. It's okay to go to a doctor. It's okay to take antidepressant medication prescribed by a doctor. That's okay. And then in the way we see the world, the message of Revelation says, God says, I'm doing a new thing in your life. And even if you feel like you're really low in one of these valleys, I've got plans for you. And you're not always going to be in one of those valleys. I want to do a new thing that's going to challenge you, yes, but it's also going to comfort you. And things are going to get better for you. Do you believe that? Things are going to get better for you. In that thing that steals your peace, your joy, you wish the circumstances would change, but they don't change. The new thing says, no, I want to comfort you. Things are going to get better for you. Look at the words, the phrases in this chapter. God will dwell with us. It's not just in the future. God will dwell with us. God will wipe away every tear. No more death, mourning, crying, or pain. Jesus freely gives us the water of life. It means more if you live in the desert. You know how important water is. You name a church, the well. Water is important here. He gives us the water of life. We will inherit all of this. We are God's children. Even if you feel alone, you feel beaten down, it's hard for you to feel joy, to feel peace. God says, no, the new thing I'm doing in your life is not only going to challenge you, it will challenge you, but not just that, it's going to comfort you. And if you feel like you're in one of those valleys, look, this is your future. This is your future. Do you believe that? If you're hurting right now, this is what your future looks like. This is what the Scripture says. This is what Revelation says. This is what Jesus says. If you're hurting, if you say, Ryan, I can't possibly believe that, can the Spirit of God help you to muster up faith? Or you go seek out antidepressants, seek out counseling, but this is your future. Isn't that good news? That's what Revelation says. This is what your future looks like. This is your future. If you feel like, man, America is just going to hell in a handbasket, well, things are going to get really rough. This is the future. This is the future for God's people. So that new thing that God is doing in your life, it's going to challenge you, yes, but it's also going to comfort you. Now, one of the ways we can receive comfort, and I did this last week, and watch how smoothly I do this again. Watch how I transition into a commercial for new Connect groups. If you feel like you need to be comforted and challenged, okay, but you feel like, man, I need some help being open to the new thing God is doing in my life. I want to be open. I want to make friends in a new community. I want to explore my faith. I want to have deeper friendships. I want to get involved and do things that matter in the world. And I want to have support for my daily life and work stress and financial stress. I want to have a group of people I can talk with. One of the ways God can comfort you and challenge you is through a new Connect group. And they're beginning soon. We have 3 new groups, brand new groups. They're only 6 weeks long. We do that on purpose. So it's not intimidating to try one out. And if you go to wellchurch.org, that's going to be the hub for these groups. You can see all the groups listed there. And to sign up for a group, to RSVP, you just click on the link for the Facebook page of each group underneath the group listed there. And it'll take you to their Facebook page, and that's how the leader will communicate with you. If you don't have Facebook, somebody said, oh, I'm not really on Facebook, there's an email address there, and we'll put you in touch with the leader. And you can get involved. It's just for 6 weeks, 3 different topics, 3 different nights of the week, different times, different leaders. And you can get involved, and I promise you, that 6 weeks is going to go really fast, first of all, but you'll be like, oh, I'm so glad I did this. We're all busy, but you'll see, oh, I'm so glad that I tried out a new Connect group, and you might meet people who are some of your best friends for the rest of your life. And then finally, the new thing God is doing will help to see you both your future and your present differently. If you're open to the new thing God is doing in your life, whatever it is right now, whatever God's trying to do, maybe you feel like it's covered. Well, we want to uncover that. That's the message of Revelation. I can't see it. Well, we want to be able to see it. Once you start looking, where is God working in my life? What does God want to do in my life? Who is God putting in my life? Like new Connect groups. Hint, hint. That was meant to be funny. It was way funnier in my head than it was out loud. I'll give you that. The new thing that God is doing in my life. Where is God working? How can I see God working here? Okay, the circumstances aren't changing, but how can I change? How can I adapt? How can I be flexible? What's God trying to say to me here? Maybe this isn't the thing for me, this job. Maybe I need to change something. You're right? You're looking for where God is working. And you can see both your future and your present in a new way. God is always doing a new thing, even if you can't see it. And that's one of the most challenging things in life, when you feel like you're in the waiting room of life. We all know that feeling when you're waiting to get the results of the test, when you're waiting to see the doctor, and you wish things would change, but they don't change. I don't know how many of you here are country fans. I'm not sure. It would be an interesting poll, probably. And I'm not the biggest country fan in the world, but I know a few songs. And I remember back in the 90s, Garth Brooks recorded a song that was based on a real-life experience he had. He had gotten married to his wife at that time, Sandy, and in October of 1989, he went to a fundraising event in his hometown in Oklahoma, and he ran into his high school crush. Do you know the song? Any country fans know the song I'm referring to here? A few of you. And so he later admitted that in the first 2 years of his marriage, he actually thought the woman who was really for him was this high school crush. Even after he'd been married a couple of years, he thought, maybe I missed out, and I should have married this girl who was his high school crush. He was still in love with her, or at least in love with the memory of her. And so he went to this event, and he ran into her. And they had a conversation, and he said, in that event, as he talked with her, and he was, think about the stakes are high here. This is a married guy. He's been married for 2 years. He began to realize that even though he had hoped and prayed for this high school crush to be his wife, he said, you know what? I'm better off with the woman I have, his wife. And he and a man named Pat Alger, who had a similar experience, and another gentleman wrote a song called, what's the name of the song? I Thank God for Unanswered Prayers. Isn't that great? Unanswered Prayers. And Pat, one of the co-writers, said, yeah, that's the essence of the song. You wish for things, and then sometimes you're really glad the Lord wasn't listening, or that God said no. Or he said, a lot of pastors have used this song as a jumping off place for a sermon, so add me to that list, Pat. So here the part of the lyrics. The song's called Unanswered Prayers. It says, sometimes I thank God for unanswered prayers. Remember when you're talking to the man upstairs, you got to love country, that just because he doesn't answer doesn't mean he don't care. Some of God's greatest gifts are unanswered prayers. I don't know if you're a country fan or not, but that's good theology. That's true to life. There are times, and maybe God still listens, but God says, actually, you're going to be glad that I don't say yes, because there are some things you can't see right now. And in time, maybe with the benefit of hindsight, we're going to be able to lift the cover off. We're going to have an apocalypse here. We're going to reveal what was behind the scenes the whole time, and you'll see that what I was doing was actually better than what you were praying for. Now that sounds good, but that's one of the toughest lessons in life, isn't it? The thing that God is doing will cause you to see differently. And so when we're looking for God working, we always have to keep in mind, it may be that what God is doing is actually better than what I'm praying for. And now, it's not that circumstances are going to change as quickly as I would like, but I'm going to change. And like we said earlier, Jesus is saying to me, we're not going to remove all tribulation here, but I've been through it all, and I'm alive to tell you about it, and I'm with you. You're not going to be alone. I'm going to be there with you. And the thing that I'm doing in your life, the new thing, is going to be better than even the thing you're praying for. So are you grieving? Are you hurting? This passage says that God wants to comfort you, not just in the future someday, but right now. Wipe away tears, help you to grieve, help you to mourn, and you'll get to a place where there won't be any mourning or crying or pain. Do you need rest? Do you feel fatigued? Do you feel overly busy? Oh, I'm too busy to be a part of a Connect group, that kind of thing. Well, the pressures of American life. Well, Jesus says, I'm going to give you the water of life. That's refreshment, rest, like taking a hike, and it feels so nice to take a drink of water. If you feel stressed out, I'm going to give you the water of life. Are you struggling with trying to earn somebody's approval? Are you struggling in a relationship? Do you have this pain from the past, this voice telling you to do more and more, and it's a shame-based message that somehow has gotten into a loop in your head? Who am I to do this? I'm not good enough to do this. You're doubting yourself. God says, you are my child. You're going to inherit all of this. I have good things for you. I have a good future for you. You don't have to be a pessimist. This is your future. You're my child. This is your inheritance. If you feel not good enough, no, this is who you really are. Next week, we're going to start this new series, Growth Track, commercial number 2. And we're going to talk about what it looks like to be open to God and hearing those messages about who you are, belonging and becoming your best self, the person God's created you to be, and discovering your purpose in this world and partnering with God to make a difference and experiencing the fulfillment of that. That's what we're starting next week, building on this. But this is your future. You don't have to believe these negative messages that tear you down and steal your joy. God has comfort for you, and I want to close this story just out of my own life. A couple of weeks ago, Hannah and I took the boys to see Spider-Man, the new Spider-Man movie out, and we went to the Harkins Theater at Gilbert and Germain. And we got into the movie, and it was our youngest son is 6 years old, and we should have known. The movie was a little much for a 6-year-old. So pretty soon, like, okay, this is too scary for him. And I took him out, and we caught the end of another movie that was more age appropriate for him, and then we went and played arcade games, and we had fun out in the hallway in the theater. And then I looked down the hall, and I saw that one of the theaters was empty. And most of you probably don't know this, a few of you do. When Hannah and I first moved here 10 years ago, and we started a church called One Church at the time, and the very first place we had a service was that Harkins Theater at Gilbert and Germain. We had monthly preview services for a few months before we launched weekly services, and the very first 2 preview services were at that Harkins Theater at Gilbert and Germain until somebody apparently accidentally pulled the fire alarm, and Harkins was like, yeah, you're going to have to find another place to meet. And so we had to roll with the punches. But the first 2 monthly services were at that theater, and I saw that particular theater where we actually met was open. And so I took my son inside, and I want to show you the picture. He wasn't even alive when we had services in that theater, but that's the exact theater where we had our first 2 services when Hannah and I moved out here. And that look on his face, that theater was dark, and afterwards he's like, Daddy, I can't see anything. The flashlight blinded him. Poor kid. I'm like, stand right there. This is going to be a great picture. He's like, poof. And so I told him the story that we had church there. Now, some of you who have known me for a long time, I've shared this in the past because this has been a big deal in my life. But I remember the first preview service we ever had. We set up all this equipment, and I was in my road crew clothes, and then I went to the restroom to change like I do now. And I went into the bathroom at Harkins Theater, and I was so filled with anxiety and fear, I was on the verge of vomiting. And I was literally changing clothes in the bathroom, and I had this loop in my head. Who are you to start a church? Who are you to do this? You can't do this. Look at all the stuff that needs to happen. You move your wife out here away from family. Our oldest son was just a little guy at the time. You got a child. You're taking this massive risk. Who are you to do this? I mean, as I'm changing in the bathroom, getting ready to go give a sermon, I was just filled with anxiety. And I wish that was the end. The first 6 months after we started weekly services, I would feel sick on Saturday nights. Saturday nights were miserable for me because I just felt this anxiety, this fear. And I always had this shame-based question. Who are you to do this? Why would you do this? You can't do this. It's terrible. Somehow, about 6 months in, I started to have this realization. I began to realize, wait a second, like the message of Revelation, God does all this stuff. These people are God's children. Jesus says in Matthew 18, I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. And God builds his church. God draws people. God calls out God's children. God wipes every tear from their eyes. God speaks to people. God renews people. God is renewing creation. God is doing a new thing in people's lives. All this doesn't depend on me. It's not like, it's who are you to do this? Well, I'm just a dude, but it doesn't matter. That question is immaterial because God is doing all these things. All I have to do is be faithful. All I have to do is just say yes and do my best. And somehow, God incredibly does all of these things. If it's a struggle for you to be open to the challenge and the comfort and to see what God is doing, to see your present and your future and maybe even your past and the voices in your head in a new way. What God has been doing in my life for the past 10 years has been helping me to understand, Ryan, first of all, it doesn't matter who you are to start a new church because you're my child. And I am dwelling with you just like everybody else. And I'm renewing you, and I'm renewing people who come to a church, and I build my church, and nothing's going to overcome it. It's not all on your shoulders, bud. Let me take this. I was thinking about that this morning as I changed in the bathroom. I'm not on the verge of throwing up anymore. I just feel like, I have seen enough now. God has done a new thing in my life, has been doing a new thing in my life, to where I know that it doesn't all depend on me. I don't have to feel the anxiety and the fear. I have to work hard to do a good job, but that's different. I don't have to entertain shame-based questions because it doesn't matter anyway. But even if it did, God says, you're my child. You inherit all of this. The same thing is true for you. Whatever new thing God is doing in your life. There can be doubts, there can be questions that come up, but that new thing is going to be like saying to you, you're my child. This is your inheritance. This is your future. Be open to the new thing that I'm doing in your life. It's going to challenge you, but it's also going to comfort you. And even if you feel like there are unanswered prayers, there's going to come a time when you're able to take off the cover. You're going to experience the apocalypse. And it's going to be revealed to you. Oh, you know what? That's how God was working. And I was open and I partnered with God. And with the benefit of hindsight, I can see now how it all was this amazing plan and how it's all worked out, even in the pain. God didn't cause all that. We don't believe God causes suffering to teach us a lesson and things like that. No, but God works in those things if we're open to the new thing God is doing. Let's pray together. God, thank you for the message of Revelation. We've sped through a complex, complicated letter in 6 weeks. And there are so many things that we could have covered. So many things left out. But our hope is, God, that there were maybe some new insights or some new directions, new ways of seeing, frankly. For some of us, and when it comes to this mysterious letter. And God, we live in a time in which interest is being renewed in Revelation in the end times because of the chaos, the upheaval that we see all around us. Our society at times feels like it's coming unglued. The foundations are being shaken. God, we don't know when the end will come. Jesus said no one knows the day or the hour. We don't know if it'll be soon or if it'll be 1,000 years from now. But what we do see, God, is that Revelation's not just about the end. You're not just working in the end of time. You're working right here, right now. You're in our lives doing a new thing always. Renewing, restoring, recreating, healing, leading us towards wholeness. That's what salvation means, not someplace, some other time, but it's about what you're doing here and what you will do later. And so, God, we want to be open to the new thing that you're doing in our lives. And you know it's scary. We know that you know that because the very first words out of your mouth to John was, do not be afraid. I'm going to reveal some things to you. I'm going to lift the cover off here. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of the new thing I'm doing in your life. Even if you don't understand it all, even if you can't see it all right now, there will come a time when you do see fully, where you can even thank me for unanswered prayers. Because I knew that even though there was tribulation, there was suffering, there was pain, I had something better in store for you than even what you were praying for. And I know that's hard. I know what it's like to suffer. I know what it's like to pray, God, if it's possible, may this cup pass from me. But nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. I know what that's like. I know how painful that is. But I know that there's resurrection and new creation and hope and joy on the other side. I've experienced it. And I'm going to walk with you through that as you're open to the new thing that I'm doing in your life that's going to bring you comfort and wipe away tears and help you to grieve and get to a place eventually where there's no more mourning, death, or crying or pain. And you are my child, and you're going to inherit all this, and this is your future. This is what your future looks like. God, we thank you for your healing message through Revelation. As we go into this Growth Track series now, and we build on this, about what it looks like in practical ways to be open, what it looks like to belong in a community, to not live alone, what it looks like to become all that you've created us to be, what it looks like to discover our purpose, what it looks like to partner with you. God, help us to see and help us to be open. In Jesus' name, and everybody said,